So once again, happy Friday. It is really good to see all you folks here today. Let's get started like we normally do. Short period of bell meditation. So wherever you are behind your avatar, just get into a nice meditation posture. And as I ring the Ching bell here in this beautiful virtual world of Second Life, I just want you to focus on the sound. Just really get that deep listening going, get that attention, that focus, so you can absorb some Dharma today. You're going to get distracted, happens to all of us. When it does, I just want you to gently remind yourself and go back to focusing on the sound of the bell. So short meditation, then there'll be the recitations, and then we'll get on with the talk for today. So give you a moment, get into a nice posture, and we'll begin at the sound of the bell. I go for refuge to the Buddha, the teacher. I go for refuge to the Dharma, the teaching. I go for refuge to the Sangha, the taught. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I have taken refuge in the Buddha. I have taken refuge in the Dharma. I have taken refuge in the Sangha. 3 pure precepts. Cease to do harm. Do only good. Do good for others. Bodhisattva vow. However innumerable all beings are, I vow to lead them all. However inexhaustible my delusions are, I vow to extinguish them all. However immeasurable the Dharma teachings are, I vow to master them all. However endless the Buddha's way is, I vow to follow it completely. Swaha. And happy Friday, Tea Whisperer. Glad you made it. All right. Again, hello. Here we are, Buddha Center, Second Life. It's Friday again. Before I get started on today's talk, there's a couple of little ground rules I want to set. And this is going to apply to some other talks that we do later in the year. There are some talks that can bring out a lot of emotion. And I want you to be mindful of that because that is likely to happen today. This is not a time for our emotions to run wild. What we're going to talk about today are just different views of how to look at animal suffering and respond to it or react to it, as the case may be. This is not a time to talk about diet, right? This is not a time to talk about carnivores and omnivores and all that. That's not the point today. And I think you guys will get the point as I go through this because you've done this a while, right? So keep that in mind. Be mindful of your emotions. This is one of those talks that will certainly bring some of them out. Chances are it's going to make me a little teary-eyed at one point too. So here we go. This is on views of animal suffering. I talk to you guys a lot about the concept of human flourishing, happiness, health, and harmony. It comes up a whole lot when we talk because that's one of the things that we're shooting for, right? Because that's part of the alleviation of suffering. And we strive to take the actions needed to be happy and to be healthy and to live in harmony with ourselves, others, and this beautiful world that we get to live in that's around us. So, flourishing must go beyond the human realm for us, into the realm of dogs, cats, and sugar gliders, and snakes, and hamsters, and the other animals that we bring into our tribe. And this is a reference to, remember, we talked about what a tribe is. And a tribe can include those pets and stuff because they offer us support of one sort or another. But the difference is that as human beings, we guide our own flourishing, right? We take care of that. That's our responsibility. Pets don't do that. They can't. So it becomes our responsibility because we're their custodian. And it sometimes requires difficult decisions be made. Really difficult decisions. So what I'm going to offer you now are a few things. First is going to be what I call a future Buddha Jataka tale. And there'll be more of that. You'll understand better here in a moment. There's also a personal experience where I'm probably going to get a little teary-eyed. And then there's the thoughts of Buddhist teachers on the subject of animal suffering. So I want to offer you a range here of the way people see this. Within each are views of how encompassing suffering can be, both for the animal and for the human. I'm going to start out with a future Buddha Jataka tale. You guys probably heard of Jataka tales. They're traditional tales. They're said to be the stories of Siddhartha's previous lives before he awakened. And they're meant to teach good lessons in things like ethical thought and moral action. Siddhartha was viewed in these Jataka tales as having lived lives as a beggar and a king, a holy man and an untouchable, an eagle and a hummingbird, a lion and a rabbit, a water nymph and a devil, and many others. And in all of them, he learned lessons of wisdom. Wisdom that would eventually lead him to his life as Siddhartha, and then on as the awakened one upon his death. Such a deal. Siddhartha is the historical Buddha of our time. Sounds strange to say, right? 2,600 plus or minus years later, but we still call him the historical Buddha of our time. But what about a future Buddha? Well, the awakened one told us, quote, "I am not the first Buddha to come upon this earth, nor shall I be the last. Previously, there were many Buddhas who appeared in this world. In due time, another Buddha will arise in this world, within this world cycle." Unquote. Viewing this as a truth, those previous lives have been or are currently being lived right in this moment. Meaning, if there is a future Buddha, and I believe there's going to be a future Buddha, well, if they are in fact going through lives as bodhisattvas to gain all this wisdom before they become that future Buddha, then they must be creating the tales, much like the Jataka tales of the ancient Hindu culture. So, what are the lives of the future Buddha? What lessons have the future awakened one learned? With all this rattling around in my head, of course, I had to try to write some future Buddha Jataka tales. What kind of lessons could he be learning? He or she, as a matter of fact. And like the traditional tales, the bodhisattva can arise as any sentient being because, as they say, all sentient beings might be a Buddha. Traditional Jataka tales begin like this. Once upon a time when, and that's to denote events and people from the past. Future Jataka tales, as I write more of them, they're going to begin this way, in this time. And that's to show their more immediate connection to our present moment. And also because I like to have fun writing, to be honest. Now, the foundation of this tale, I must tell you, arose from a question that was posed to Mahatma Gandhi by a Professor Mays in January 1937. More about this can be found in the Moral and Political Writings of Mahatma Gandhi. It's on page 396 if you're interested. And it's in a letter that he wrote called The Efficacy of Non-Harming. So it's a very interesting letter overall, but I saw bits and pieces of this tale and I kind of reimagined it. So here we go. This is a future Buddha Jataka tale. And this is called Suffering Calf. In this time, there was a man born in India into the Vaishya, or the business caste. He studied and practiced the ways of ahimsa, non-harming. Throughout his whole life he did this, and eventually attracting others by his speech and actions. He was a good example. And over time he was looked upon as a guru of ahimsa, a man whose life could be set forth as an example of living a non-harming life. Many people gathered in his ashram to experience his wisdom. One day, a man, his name was Adarsh, and that means ideal, who took care of the cows of the village, came to his guru with a problem. And he said, "Teacher, there is a calf recently born who is suffering. Born lame in his right front leg, with great oozing sores down that leg, and beginning to spread across its chest, it is in a lot of pain. I try to feed it with the softest grains, warm milk just gotten from its mother, and fresh shoots of grass that I pre-chew for the calf, all of which it refuses. It cannot walk or run like the other calves because it quickly becomes winded, its breath wheezing and shallow. It is living with this disease, and I am not certain what to do." The guru gathered together the cowherder along with his two wisest students. They discussed the issue for 3 days before the guru asked them for their opinions. One said, "Our vow of ahimsa requires us to make the calf as comfortable as possible, so to limit suffering. It could be moved to a separate field, given a soft bed to lay on, someone could sit with it, talk softly to it, and sing songs of beauty and content. Then, when it dies, give it an appropriate burial rite." The guru nodded at that. The other said, "A calf so ill could pass along its disease to the other cows in the village. It should be harnessed and taken to a far field, its throat slit, and its body burned." The guru nodded again. The guru turned to the cowherd. "What is your opinion?" And the cowherd responded, "I do not want the other village cows to fall ill if this disease were to spread, and it causes me anguish to see the calf in such pain and suffering, waiting for it to die. Teacher, my mind and my body are at odds. The thoughts that arise are of compassion and non-harming, while I suffer right along with the calf." And the guru nodded. "Let us go to this calf." The guru, the cowherd, and the two students found the calf at the outskirts of the village. It stood trembling, leaning against a Bodhi tree. From a distance, they could all hear its labored breathing and see its tongue hanging loose like a dry piece of cloth. This calf is suffering. The cowherd is suffering. The calf's herd hears and experiences its suffering. All who see the suffering of this calf also suffer. The guru took a sharp blade from under his robe. He stepped close to the calf, and with a smooth motion, he slit the animal's throat. Ignoring the blood gushing out, He sat down, gently pulled the calf's head into his lap. The guru sat there holding the young animal close until the life left its eyes. The response to his action was immediate. "Teacher, you have killed! You have acted violently!" This was the response of both of his wise students. The cowherd, he looked relieved, and he bowed deeply to the teacher. Now, the teacher says, that action was nonviolent because it was wholly unselfish, inasmuch as the sole purpose was to achieve the calf's relief from pain and suffering. Some people may name this an act of harming. I call it a surgical operation. I would do exactly the same thing with my child if he were in the same predicament. My point is that non-harming as the supreme law of our being ceases to be such the moment you talk of exceptions. So, there's a future Buddha Jataka tale, suffering calf. The whole thing kind of boils down to that last sentence. My point is that non-harming as the supreme law of our being ceases to be such the moment you talk of exceptions. It's saying different situations require different actions. So throughout this story, we get the different emotional contexts, right, that can happen when an animal is suffering, different ways of thinking about how to handle the situation, different ways of looking beyond just the suffering of the calf, right, to encompass those that suffer because of the calf's suffering and then those that may suffer in the future because of that suffering. Does it sound familiar? Kind of sounds like the pandemic we're going through right now. Is there choices to be made? And I'm not saying people need to die, of course, but we have to make choices. We have to isolate ourselves, as the one wise student said, well, just isolate the calf. So this is a few views on the suffering of animals and ways to look at them, to view them, and to take action. Pretty drastic action there at the end, but action certainly. So that was the future Buddha Jataka tale. Now for the personal experience. There are some of you here that have been with me for quite a while now, and you know that I used to have a dog, and her name was River. And I say was because we had to have her euthanized. We had to have her, as they say here in Missouri, put down. I'm not a big fan of that term, but that's what they call it. We'd had River for about 8 years. She was definitely a member of the family. She canoed and kayaked with us, and she hiked with us and camped with us. She did all that. She was just a great dog. Well, she got cancer in her nose. She got nasal lymphoma cancer thing. We took her to animal cancer doctors once a day for weeks, and anyway, lots of stuff went on. But in the end, her quality of life was just getting so bad, and she was in such pain and discomfort, which, of course, as the suffering calf relates to us, it's not just the animal that suffers, right? It's those that care about the animal, whether it's a pet or a farm animal. It's how we care about it. So it was a very traumatic thing for Mary and I also. So we did end up having to have River euthanized. This was not an easy decision to make because you want that animal with you, right? They are part of the family. You're not looking to find death. You want to find life. But sometimes we can't. It isn't there. And we have to learn to make the better choice, maybe not for ourselves, but for the animal involved. Was this easy? No. But we have to look to our practice. We have to look to our belief system that we're building up as we walk the noble path and say, I want to make the best possible decision beyond my own emotional context. And this can be very hard to do in the case where a pet is suffering like that. So we did have her euthanized, and we had her cremated, and we took her and spilled her ashes in her favorite river that she liked to play in. So in the end, when we make those choices, while they can hurt and be painful, we can also find some solace, right? Some easing of grief. So that's a personal experience. And that was a view that I had to develop and Mary had to develop. And look, we got to be honest here. It is easy to imagine upholding the view of non-harming when your pet is healthy or even just relatively pain-free. You know, maybe they have a hip dysplasia slightly, but they get around good. They still have a great life. You know, it's easy to imagine saying, well, no, I'd never harm that, right? I'd never do that. But when an animal is in agony and it's suffering so badly, the choice to end that pet's suffering, despite whatever belief you might have in karma or what happens in future lifetimes, it often begins to seem like the only sane and compassionate response that you can make. Man, I have to say again, is this easy? No. But unfortunately, a lot of our choices we make in life aren't easy. And the choices we make for death, they're certainly never easy. There is a Tibetan Buddhist, I guess you'd call it a group that's kind of scattered all over America and the East. It's called Jewel Heart Sangha, and you may have heard of it. There is one of the teachers there, Rinpoche Gelek, and he had a very interesting quote about this whole situation, and quote, "From the point of view of the Dharma, anything that shortens life, absolutely not okay. But when you know that the quality of the pet's life has deteriorated and it will not live much longer, then you're given the opportunity to shorten it," he adds. He euthanized his own dog when it came down with distemper. So let's look at that quote again. From the point of view of the Dharma, anything that shortens life, absolutely not okay. That makes sense. But that word also makes sense because it points directly to the situationality of we have an ethical stand, but we have to make a moral choice. So you know the quality of the pet's life is bad, and by the way, yours isn't so good either. That life has deteriorated, they're not going to live much longer, then you have to decide about that giving of the opportunity. What the opportunity you're being given there is the opportunity to make a choice, to be that pet's custodian, because they can't make that choice. And keep in mind here, with all Rinpoche Gelek's practice, with all his faith in the Dharma, with all his learning and practice and, offering it to others, in the end, he still had to make a situational choice, and he euthanized his dog because it was ill and it wasn't going to get better. Got to say it again. Is this easy? No. But it has to be done. There was an article in Tricycle magazine. This was the summer of 2002, so this was a while ago. It was called Putting Spot Down. It was by a gentleman named Trich Deech Rohrer. I hope I pronounced that even close to right. And they said in that article, when it comes to the dilemma of whether or not to euthanize an animal dying in pain, from the Buddhist perspective, there are two prevalent views. The first is that we should not interfere in any way with the natural dying process, even if it is prolonged, even if it is painful. The other view holds that if we have the right intention, it is proper and compassionate to end the life of a suffering pet. Finally, the word comes up, intent. What is the intent? The situation often gets murky, though, because questions about right intention and then compassionate action, they arise. I mean, I remember all this from River. I remember thinking about those two views, and I remember thinking about this question. Is killing in the belief that it is a virtuous thing to do, or excuse me, is killing in the belief that it is a virtuous thing to do, is that just killing out of ignorance? Can we be certain of our own intention? There's that word again, intention. So I go to the words of another Dharma teacher named Judy Leaf, and she said in that same article, she was quoted with this, she said, consider this question. When this opportunity, if you want to call it that, arises, and you have a suffering pet or a suffering animal in general, ask yourself this question. When you are deciding about euthanizing the animal, is this for your own benefit or your animal's? Who is suffering, you or your animal? If you choose not to euthanize your pet, are you doing so because you can't let go? Unquote. Wow. That's the questions you have to ask yourself. Number one, is the pet really the one doing most of the suffering, or are you the one doing most of the suffering? Is it your anxiety, your fear, your attachment? Is this what's affecting your choices? Because if it is, then you've got to get past that. You've got to get past, are you doing this for your benefit or the animals? Is their suffering so bad that the best choice you can make for them is to let them go? Or are they just having some problems and maybe you have to carry them outside to go to the bathroom because they're having a little trouble walking up and down stairs, and that's too much of a hassle for you, so you just rather have them euthanized? You might think that's a far-fetched thing, but trust me, it ain't. See, one is good intent, one ain't, right? Bad intent. So something I said way earlier, I said the Buddha experienced the future but acted in the present. When considering euthanizing a pet, this is what we must do. Another question. What will my pet's life be like in the future? The answer to that question, and it's got to be an honest one, will lead to action in the present. So you look to the future, in this case, to make a decision for the present. This is extremely difficult to do. It's extremely difficult to think about, but we must do it for them. Remember, we can make the choice. They can't. We are their custodian, and we are responsible for their flourishing.